Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I am a public high school teacher in rural New Mexico, and today I'm going to talk about how to use a bad textbook. In my classroom, my students usually hear to me refer to a textbook as my frenemy. If we're being realistic, most teachers have issues with a textbook one way or another. And that largely comes from the problem of standardization. There is no way that this textbook it can have the best texts, the best sequencing, the best questions, the best anything for your students. Because every community, every school, every classroom each year is different. And the kids in your community and the kids in my community need two different things. And they probably need different curriculum because your curriculum shouldn't just be whatever the textbook says it should be. It should be whatever is going to serve the needs of your students. Maybe you have the problem of a textbook that's required by your school or your district. Maybe you work with a partner, a co-teacher, or maybe a grade level team that all has to use the same texts. So there's lots of reasons why we use textbooks. Most of the time, it has some things that are just flat out offensive, things that are wrong, or you might have other problems with your curriculum that I've had in the past, like not enough textbooks, outdated textbooks, worn textbooks, destroyed textbooks. So these tips will also work if you are a brand new teacher, you don't know where to start. They also will work if you are an experienced teacher and you're trying to get away from a textbook. If you're moving to a new grade level and you're just not really sure what to do or where to start, this will also help you out a lot. So my first tip is that you need to research. The basis of research when it comes to curriculum building is you need to figure out what the essential question that your course is asking actually is. So what I mean by that is, let's say you are teaching 11th grade English and these are the textbooks that you find in your classroom, much like I did. Actually, when I started at my school, there were 9th grade textbooks in my classroom, so I had to go hunting to find 11th grade ones. It took me a while. Let's say this is the 11th grade book. Yes, I am transferring between schools. So, yes, I will return this book to the school after I finish this video. I forgot that I had taken this book. Whoops. Don't rat me out. Okay. So what I would do is I need to start my research. The easiest way that you could do this is literally with Google. Google 11th grade ELA curriculum, unit plans, syllabus, things like that, and see what other teachers are doing. Not that you have to teach what they're teaching, or not that you even have to do the same things that they're doing, but just get an idea of what's out there. So, collection 1 is called Coming to America. Can you see the problem of starting an American literature class with the unit Coming to America when the first text is a historical account of Plymouth Plantation? Not only is that ahistorical because it says Coming to America, and that's a text written before there even was a country called America, but also it's sort of setting kids up for failure because then they're learning that American literature starts with colonization. Back to my tip, look at the essential question of your course. If I notice that the first question here is Coming to America, this is building a democracy, the individual and society, a new birth of freedom, and an age of realism. Wow, it sounds like my course is supposed to talk about America. So the essential question that my course might ask is, what is America? What are American values? Things like that. What is that noise? Anyways, so once I sort of know what my class is asking, it is a little bit easier from there. For instance, when I first started teaching 10th grade at my school site, I wasn't really sure it was sort of expressed to me that ninth grade really was focusing heavy on poetry and Shakespeare. Not a super big fan of that focus, but whatever. And I knew that 12th grade was really focused on informational writing and personal narrative, but I didn't really know what 10th grade was supposed to be. Basically, after surveying the texts and what curriculum I could find online and what things best suited my district's framework, having a world literature class actually made more sense. So that's what I mean about investigating and finding resources. The second tip is to think about the scope and sequence of the class. This is going to be helpful if you have a textbook, even a bad one, because I know that really what I need to touch on is probably something about the founding of America. I'm seeing 2 units about the building of a democracy, and I know that in the Common Core State Standards, which I know that I need to teach things like the Declaration and the Constitution, so I know that that needs to be in there. There needs to be some kind of conversation about that. I know that by reading through this, I see some poetry, especially Dickinson and Whitman, so I probably should talk about some type of poetry, especially structured poetry that has interesting elements like Dickinson's. I'm seeing some speeches by Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, so I know that I need to teach rhetoric, especially rhetoric with perhaps what could be considered archaic language. So just sort of look through and see, what do you notice? What do you notice thematically, genre-wise? What types of skills are being asked here? So this textbook at the end has some collection performance tasks. Now, of course, these performance tasks I never have used, but it can be helpful to sort of see what is the scope that this textbook wants. So here they're supposed to present a persuasive speech, write an analytical essay. So that's what I mean, is sort of understand what the scope and sequence of your class could be. And if you need to deviate from it, that's fine, but you have to start somewhere. Tip number 3. This is my personal tip. Make your class chronological. What I mean by this is that often textbooks like this attempt to present things chronologically, but they present it chronologically according to the canon, okay? Now, the canon is false, just number one, because it assumes a set of values that may not be important for your community. It assumes a set of values that are unaltered by time, and it assumes a set of values that are worthy simply because they've always been taught. And we all know that that's not true. Now, this is where I'm saying you may need to deviate from the chronology, because that first few weeks is crucial for building rapport with your students. And picking a text that's going to be more important to them and to you is more important than sticking with a prescribed canon or chronological way of building a course. So I started my class before with excerpts from things like House on Mango Street or The Way to Rainy Mountain, rather than jumping into something that is really alienating and needs so much supplement versus something that is immediately identifiable, immediately accessible to everyone, and immediately understandable. If you're starting with something right away that's 50 pages, you're not actually responding to the chaos that is the beginning of school. You want dialogue, you want discussion, and making students read a 50-page personal diary that's written in the language of the 1600s is not going to set them up for that expectation. However, I am a fan overall of teaching my class chronologically. For instance, if I'm going to teach the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, this textbook has me teaching a section of what it calls the Iroquois Confederation and the Iroquois Constitution, which might be better referenced as the Haudenosaunee. Doesn't have me teaching it until Unit 4. Now, the U.S. Constitution was based on some elements of their constitution, of the Haudenosaunee's own beliefs about what it meant to live collectively and with a set of democratic beliefs. Now, if I wait until Unit 4 to introduce that, not only am I being ahistorical, but I'm not providing students with the correct understanding and context of what's going on. If I teach the Declaration of Independence and Thomas Jefferson without bringing up Sally Hemings and without talking about the topic of slavery until the Civil War, I'm doing my students a huge disservice. Step number 4. Think about what is going to be your anchors. So this doesn't necessarily mean what is canonical, but it might mean that, especially if you're trying to think about what you have access to. And what I mean there is, where can you adjust your canon? So where can you adjust things? Like, do you need to teach To Kill a Mockingbird in 9th grade? But I do understand that there are limitations in some ways, and sometimes you have to pick your battles. And sometimes picking your battle means you're going to fight for a different text at a different time. Like, for instance, for me, it was, I'm not teaching Huckleberry Finn. And so I had to make the concession that maybe I'm going to have to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, because that was the compromise my school came up with. Does that mean that next year that fight's not going to come up again? You bet your bottom dollar it's coming up again. We're working on it, right? We're working on it. Anyways, your anchor as something that's in the distance. If all your kids are reading is something in the distance, something that's far away, something that feels foreign and old, it's going to make it seem like the only things that are relevant are things that are old. So I like to think about it as, if I'm teaching things chronologically, is keep that distance, keep that history there, that's fine. But then what is going to be the modern reflection that's going to talk back? And it's okay that there can be a little difference there and be a little distance. So by inviting kids to bridge that gap when they're ready is a lot more helpful than the two extremes, which are teaching only modern and requiring only personal narrative and requiring personal responses to everything, or teaching only history, only things that are removed and that nature. Those are both really harmful ways to go about it, in my opinion. And I think that there's a better way to bridge that gap, which is know your anchors and then know how you're going to build from that to best support the students who are in your classroom. Number 5, skip stuff. Skip stuff. Be willing to skip stuff. Here's what I might mean by this. One of these units has me teach Jack London. Now, the whole time I've been teaching in New Mexico, I have never once, even the times I've planned for it, got the chance to teach Jack London. Now, let me tell you something. I hate Jack London as much as the next person. But I always see it in here, and it's in a lot of curriculums, it's in a lot of textbooks, and I always feel obligated. You know what? Let it go. Let it go. Sometimes it could be things you love too. Let it go. Whether or not it's things that you outright don't like, because if you don't like it, sometimes the kids pick up on that. Scratch that. Kids always pick up on it. And it's going to make it hard to teach. Sometimes though, you have to get rid of stuff you love too, and be okay with that. My last tip, which you might be like, this seems to sort of run counterintuitive to your last tip, but it's find the holes in the curriculum and fix them. So this whole textbook has an entire unit on transcendentalism. I hate transcendentalism. I hate teaching it, but I understand that I need to fix that hole in my curriculum. I hate teaching transcendentalism and naturalism, but over the years I've noticed that it comes up on my students' state testing a lot. And for a place that's high desert and there's not a lot of forests and trees and there's certainly no lakes and rivers, it can be really hard when they get somewhere and they just feel like they can't access something because they don't know the terminology around water and lakes. So I do think it's important that our curriculum functions as both a mirror and a window. But your curriculum should not only reflect back to students things that are like them, but it should also give them windows into things that are not like what they already know. And I know that my kids always struggle with learning satire. So I taught Walt Whitman sarcastically, wrote about him as if it were satire, and satirized him the whole time. And do you know what? Those were the best dang essays and posters and videos and anything that my kids had ever written that last year, because I taught them satire using something that I actually wanted to make fun of. And that is a really great way to go about bridging this to what's needed in the classroom. Just picking up a textbook and thinking that it's going to teach the kids in your room sort of falls on this idea that whatever's in here is best for them, and that also that they should just kind of sit there and soak it up because the book has all the knowledge in it, versus looking at the students who are in your room and recognizing the knowledge that they already have, recognizing the things that they could already bring, and finding ways for the text to draw those out. And so that is how you can use some of these tips to teach with a bad textbook.